All right, welcome everybody to this week's episode of The Movie Show, where we are going to be reviewing Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw Ridge.
Now, as you know, if you've watched the show before, the first few minutes we're just going to talk about the general review of the movie so we don't spoil anything for you, but then we will get into the spoilers later, so stay tuned if you've watched the movie and you want to get into more depth. But if you haven't watched it, just watch a little bit, wait till we get to the review numbers, and then you can go on your merry way.
Cool. All right.
So this is the story of Desmond T. Doss. Right, he is just a mild-mannered guy, and what happens to him?
Definitely from the South.
Yes,
you can tell by the accent.
Totally from the South.
He's basically a pacifist who doesn't believe in violence or killing, but finds himself wanting to join the war effort for World War II so that he can contribute by saving lives as opposed to taking them. So he kind of ends up deciding to enlist, even though it kind of goes against everything he believes in some ways. And the movie is a lot about his struggle with dealing with that and kind of like trying to hold on to his beliefs and pursue them in the way he thinks is best, but, you know, struggling with, you know, the pressure to be violent and kill. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy of the character that we watch him go through over the course of the movie.
Well put.
Yeah, I think that summed it up quite well without giving anything away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good, Brent. You should.
Yeah, I won't tell you how World War II ends. You have to find that out.
Oh, I
I don't want to spoil World War II for you. So.
Spoiler alert.
So yeah, let's just talk about quickly. Would you recommend this movie to someone? Is this the kind of movie that works well with a broad range of friends, or is it only like you can watch it with your guy friends, or like does this have, because it has some romance in it?
True.
And it's kind of a long movie, right? It's 2 hours and 19 minutes. Was it a little too long for anybody here?
See, I actually thought it was longer than that. For me, it felt a little bit longer than that. Particularly, I feel like the first half of the movie maybe drags a little bit, though there's some of my favorite stuff in the movie is in there. But I don't know if I'd recommend this to everybody. I thought it was a really well-done movie, really well-done war movie. But it is a war movie, and that's not for everybody. There's some pretty intense violence and stuff in this movie. There's some stuff that's really hard to watch. I don't know if I would recommend it for everyone, but it is a good war movie, and if you're into that, then I would say yes, you should watch it.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think I would recommend it to friends who enjoy violent movies, because I do have a bunch of friends who like that stuff. But like Brent said, I have some friends who don't like that stuff. So I would recommend it to anyone who does like war movies, Saving Private Ryan, you know, anything like Lone Survivor, that kind of genre. It's really, you know, I think honest to the way things are in war.
Right. I would say it didn't feel like a glorification as much as like, it played out more like a horror movie, and rather than being like, look how cool this is, it's more like, holy crap, this is
It's like
horrifying.
showing the horrors of war and what it's like to actually be there in the battlefield. It kind of reminded me a lot of the Battle of the Bastards in Game of Thrones, where it's just like you're on the battlefield with them. So yeah, it was really a lot of good action.
Yeah, I would recommend it if you like war movies. Just what you said, Bobby. Like, to me, it was the most realistic war movie that I've ever seen in terms of like how, you know, being the gore and the graphics, and there was nothing cookie cutter about it. It was like real, like I'm on the battlefield. This is what it's like, and that's why. And it was based on a true story, which I love as well. So if you like that, definitely recommend it.
Yeah, in watching this, it was reminiscent of Clint Eastwood's Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. I can't remember which one's from the Japanese perspective, one's from the American perspective. I thought those two movies were just phenomenal, like very long but very well done.
Right.
This movie, it seemed to me like Mel Gibson, who directs every now and then. He hasn't directed a big movie, I think, since 2006, Apocalypto.
Yes.
And it felt like that to me. It felt like he's a good director.
Yes.
But it felt like he's a little rusty. And it felt like he took a while to get things happening. Like, he just seemed like he wasn't on his game or something. Nothing bad, but there was nothing astonishing to me about the directing of the movie. So I was expecting maybe a little bit more. Amazing scenes, amazing fighting scenes and so forth, but I did feel like a lot of the movie dragged. So would I recommend it? Yeah, I agree. If you're into war movies, definitely one you got to catch. But it's not the kind of movie I think that you are going to sit well with a group of people if they have differing effects with violence.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
I would agree.
So, I mean, this is our average rating right here, so that might give you some idea whether you should rush out and see it. And I will mention that this did win some Oscars. It won Best Editing and Best Sound Mixing. So if you're into that kind of stuff,
Yes.
you should go see it.
technical
It was
side.
nominated for 4 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Sound Editing. And it was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Picture. So it's obviously a good movie.
Yes.
But it's a very intense movie. All right, so let's take the gloves off. Let's take off the helmets. And
Can't hear myself. So.
now that Bobby's learned what the helmets were used for,
Yes.
I don't even know why he put it on his head. But
Yep.
They ate poop out of them, guys.
so one thing in this movie, and Bobby kind of touched on this when we were doing our pre-roll, was that there wasn't a whole lot of history. It seemed like they wanted to give you the personal story of
Right.
Desmond Doss, and then they wanted to give you the battle, but they didn't even tell us what year it was, for instance, or what battle this was. This was the Battle of Okinawa in May of 1945, but they just kind of dropped you there. And it didn't do any job of putting this in context, which I guess is what they wanted to do. But a kind of a shame, because this would have been a good way to get that story out, I thought, but they didn't bother to do it. Did that bother any of you? Did that affect you?
I was so, like, I just love, was it Andrew Garfield? I just root for him. Like, I just think he seems like a great guy. And I guess I didn't even notice that because I was just like, man, I like this guy. And he's sticking to his, beliefs and, trying not to pick up a rifle and all that. And I guess I was, just behind him the whole time. Didn't even think about that. But I would have loved to have seen what year it was. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they touched on history a bit. His father obviously fought in World War I and had some serious problems with after he learned that he was just used as a pawn kind of in the war and wanted his sons to not make that mistake. It was unclear to me. The war started in 41, and when is it that Desmond Doss signed up? And did he just sign up late? Why did it take so long?
Yeah, no, it was.
me.
Yeah, they did play around the timeline a little bit, and it wasn't always 100% clear. Where exactly things were falling perfectly in the timeline. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like as someone, I've watched a lot of war movies, it didn't bother me too much because I felt like I kind of had a general understanding of the context of how everything's happening. But yeah, we were just bringing up the father character, Hugo Weaving.
Yes.
Really cool to see him in a movie again. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen him in anything. And for me, he was my favorite performance in this movie as the father character.
Yeah, I agree. He was one of my favorite characters, but I also couldn't pinpoint how I felt about the father because, like, I was
think
like,
you're supposed to.
yeah, it was like felt like, oh, the kid says at the beginning, the brother, he says like, I hate him.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, oh, I'm supposed to hate him. And then it's sort of, he did things that made me like him.
Yeah.
And I was just very confused, but overall, a great
Yeah,
performance.
I mean, I don't think he's necessarily meant to be a black and white character. You love him, hate him.
Yeah.
I think he's obviously a very troubled guy with what he went through in World War One.
Yeah.
Which was like, if you ever hear any stories about, take some time, learn about World War One. I mean, we've seen plenty of movies about World War II, but World War One, that's just the amount of violence and death in that war is astounding.
Yeah.
And so imagine this guy who's seen those things, these battles and stuff. You can completely understand why he doesn't want his kids to be involved in that.
Oh, yeah, totally. And why he might, have some PTSD.
And the alcohol problems just to deal with what he saw.
So I don't know if Mel Gibson did this on purpose or not, but when we finally find out that Desmond Doss is a Seventh-day Adventist, which basically means that he doesn't want to have he's a pacifist. He doesn't want to take place and hold a gun. That was kind of a shock to me because they didn't seem to portray any of his religion in his early life. Like, they show us many scenes of him growing up, and that didn't seem to be portrayed. And then all of a sudden, that is a thing. Was that done on purpose?
I think that they tried to make it seem like that experience where he hit his brother in the face with the brick was a traumatic experience for him, and that affected his opinion on weapons. But I don't think they did a great job with that.
Because his brother was willing to sign up.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like they either cut out a scene or we needed a scene that helped explain why he felt this way. Because it just seemed to happen. Like, and it happened when he was basically in the army barracks.
Right.
And then we learn it. But maybe that was on purpose so that we wouldn't predict it.
Wasn't there a scene at the end where it showed him putting a gun to his father's head?
Yes.
A flashback.
His father was in like a drunken rage and hitting his mother or something like that.
Yep.
Good point. Forgot about that scene.
And that might have something to do with it.
Yeah. but almost like it was less of a religious objection and more of a moral objection.
Yeah.
Or,
Maybe they wanted to make it less about religion and more about being a pacifist and
Right.
not wanting to.
So let's talk about that, because that's the major story point in this movie, is that here's a guy who's being forced over and over. He's put in jail, and he's told all these bad things are gonna happen to you if you don't pick up a rifle, and he just won't do it.
Right.
And then he succeeds in getting through that because his father comes and interjects with the judge.
Right.
That's an important part of the story. I think that's the part that Mel Gibson was really trying to get out.
Remaining true to his convictions and
Right.
like he was willing to go to jail. Like that's so powerful to me. And can we back up a second, because the girlfriend, right? She had we haven't even talked about her, but you're rooting for him at the beginning. He gets the girl.
Yeah.
That's what leads him down the path of being a medic, right? Because
Yep.
doesn't he start reading journals and learning about
Yeah, 'cause she's a nurse.
being a
Right.
nurse and stuff? And
Yeah.
Yeah, when he gets to that hospital that day after saving that guy's life, and he looks around like, "Whoa, this is cool! Like I could save people's lives, maybe."
Right.
Yeah, she did a great job playing the character Dorothy. Like, I thought she was very good. I just think that they spent a little bit too much time on the relationship and not enough time on the war side of the story. Like, I feel like if they had started it with them being together instead of showing them falling in love and all this stuff, and it just felt like there was two different stories here, and I didn't need the romance story. I mean, it was nice, but
I think that was important though, because like he's in love with this girl.
yeah,
He doesn't want to pick up a gun,
yep,
but he's leaving the girl to go to war
yeah,
and not pick up a gun. It's just like the whole dichotomy there, if that's the right word
Yeah.
No.
to use.
Yeah.
And then further on in the movie, in the war, you have kamikaze Japanese fighters coming at you, and he's like the complete opposite, not even picking up a gun. So
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of like those two sides of the coin happening
Right.
the whole time.
I wish they had gone a little bit more into. He had this just kind of like it was instinctual feeling that he had to go to war, right, for his country.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to examine that a little bit more, like, because here's a guy who is a pacifist. So why didn't he just think, you know what, I don't want to fight at all. Like, why are we fighting?
Right.
But he had this impulse that many Americans do, which is I have to join. If we're in a war, I have to join up.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would have been. It just was a given in the movie. I would have liked to have seen him come to that place.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that's something that's symptomatic in a lot of war movies, especially from World War II. I think maybe that just speaks to that generation. There was maybe, I don't want to say a naivete to them, but there was more of like a kind of
Like a pride.
a pride and like almost like a blind pride. You know, it was kind of all about
Yeah.
country and like
Yep.
I think World War II has been in a lot of movies partially because there's such a clear enemy in it. You know, I mean, you got like Hitler as like the villain of World War II. It's like an easy war to kind of
Yeah.
like. It has a very easy narrative to get behind.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just it would have been nice to, especially for this character, which is I appreciated how this is such a unique angle for the story. Like, how does this guy fit into this story?
Yep.
And the way that the conflict's there. But yeah, I don't completely understand why he would join up. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of, I feel like, relates to the scene we were talking about where the father comes in and he brings that note. He walks in and they go, "You're not part of the army anymore." And he's like, "Oh, so what, was it all for nothing? Like, did I do it all for nothing?" And I feel like he learned later on in life that he walked into it blindly, sort of expecting this to be a lifelong brotherhood. But it ends up, being from a later perspective that it's sort of this thing you don't know that you're getting yourself into.
Right.
And like you said, sort of just jumping in because that's just the way that mentality is for that generation.
Right.
That's a really good point. Is that the father is wearing this World War I garb,
Yeah.
and he is being told kind of like, okay, that was your war. We're on to a new war.
Yeah.
This is us. This is our new team.
This is our
and
time.
you're not
Yeah.
part of that. And yeah, he was kind of like, really? Like I almost died, and now I'm not allowed to even speak to you.
Yeah.
Right.
You're taking all these young men who don't know any better, and their learning comes at the cost of going to war and learning on the battlefield.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when we get to the Army training camp. And our drill sergeant is the famous Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn!
How do you guys feel about him as the drill sergeant?
I have mixed feelings.
Yeah.
On the one hand, like, I don't think he does a terrible job in this, and I think maybe my feelings on it has more to do with my own personal feelings on Vince Vaughn as like, you know, the guy from Anchorman and Dodgeball and these kind of movies. This is more the Vince Vaughn that I know.
Wes Mantooth.
Yes, Wes Mantooth. It's hard for me to like completely take him seriously, but I don't think he does a terrible job. He's pretty good at like the one-liners and the getting into people's faces and kind of.
Yeah, when he first came in the scene, I'm like, Vince Vaughn?
Yeah.
Like I was, but then I forgot it was Vince Vaughn after a while, so I don't give him an A.
I respect him a lot for taking the role.
Right.
I think that it's a cool thing to do.
He used to do more dramatic stuff, but yeah, I don't know. Like at the end of the day, it reminds me a little bit of, if anyone who's watched True Detective, he was in season 2 and he kind of tried to do the more serious thing and it just didn't quite work.
I think it was a mistake in casting because, I mean, I like Vince Vaughn too. I think he's a great actor and so forth. But in this case, when I see him, he's being a little comedic.
Yeah.
He's almost playing it that way. I don't know if that was the director's fault letting him do that, but he's kind of like, oh, this is what you're going to do? Yeah. And I was kind of like, you should be scarier.
Yeah. I wish I could have maybe watched this movie one more time because that's the tricky thing with anything war stuff. There's so many fast, characters. Yeah, right. It's hard to remember everyone's names.
So we're in the barracks, and now we're learning that Desmond doesn't want to fight, and now everyone turns against him, and they're treating him like get out of here, you're ruining. And of course, Vince Vaughn's character makes it even harder because it's like, oh well, if he won't lift a gun, then all these bad things are going to happen to the rest of the troop.
Yeah.
And so we see that whole tribal thing that takes place when you won't act like the rest of the tribe. I thought that was very powerful.
Yes.
Because that shows us that basically we don't like to have someone who's different than us in our tribe, especially if it's a military tribe where everyone has to follow orders.
Yeah.
If we let you not follow the order, then what's Bobby going to think? You know?
Right.
And that makes it more powerful when he still remains true to his convictions and keeps going with it.
Yep.
And so, I mean, basically I would have liked to have seen his early war times before we get to the battle scenes where he's probably being treated like crap, by his fellow soldiers, where they're probably not trusting him, right? They're like, who is this guy? Mm-hmm. We only get to see like the battle starts and seeing them turn over to start to trust him, where they go, wow, this guy just saved my life.
Right.
And now we love him.
Yeah, it kind of flips very quickly there. They're like, who is that? Who just did that? It's like, oh, is that Coward Doss or whatever they say or whatever. And it's like, after that, it's like, they love him from that point.
And back to the whole quick flip. I didn't sense that at all. To me, the war was kind of chaotic and there was just like, there was intestines everywhere and people you don't think are going to get shot have their heads blown off and, oh, they're just dead. And to me, it seemed like there was a long time before he actually contributed to the point where they were like, wow, this guy's awesome. It seemed like it was just like chaos for a while until it was only the end of the
very
movie,
end when they realized that it was him.
And I loved how he remembered that back at the time when he was so disrespected by his peers. And then in the end of the story, he uses that to like become a war hero, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it just feels faster because I feel like the beginning in the movie, like from like, when he's a child to like through training, the boot camp feels so much longer than the actual war part of the movie. Yeah. That part feels very quick because it's so intense and frenetic and kind of wild.
Yeah. And I like that difference though, because it shows you like, oh, life in this peaceful world is so slow, and then all of a sudden everybody's
the realities of
in the scene where they're landing on Okinawa and they're about to become the next wave to attack the ridge, and you see the last wave going down the road, all demoralized and beaten and dead bodies. Yeah. I thought that was really powerful because I mean, imagine yourself in their shoes. You're all ready to go into the battle, and then you're just like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
You were just decimated.
Wasn't there a truck or a trailer with just full of dead bodies?
Yeah. Yeah, and then trucks full of wounded people, and they're all with that 1,000-mile stare, just like And then we meet some of the medics who have come to join up with this next attack, and they're just like zombies. I mean, they're just like they've seen the worst thing. They're not looking forward to the next day, and how you have to get your troops ready to climb this thing and go attack. I mean, that's Vince Vaughn's job, right? Is to make sure that everyone just keep moving. You're going to be killed, but keep moving, moving. That's the part of war that I just can't imagine if you're in those shoes, why you wouldn't just, I think I would just freeze up. I mean, I don't see how I could jump out of the foxhole knowing that I just saw all my comrades killed.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And how let's go to Desmond Doss now. I mean, he won the Medal of Honor because he kept jumping out of safety to go save some guy who he doesn't know if that guy's going to live even, but he's willing to jump over there, give him morphine, put a bandage on him, try and drag him to safety all the while he's being shot at. That's just, if he did it once, that would be freaking incredible, worth the honor, but he did it repeatedly. Now, I read the citation. I know that it's a movie, so you have to rewrite it for the movie. But in the citation, he did this over a number of days. May 2nd, he saved someone's life. May 3rd, he saved someone's life. May 4th, it was like 4 people's lives. He did it up until, I think, May 21st. So like the battle lasted many, many days. Now, maybe the movie, they just couldn't figure out how to tell that story over a multi-day session. Right. I would have preferred it if it was closer to the truth.
That's even more powerful, I think.
I think so.
To repeat that on a daily basis.
Yeah. This was condensed pretty much into 2 days, it seemed like. Where I think they mentioned the number 75 people that he saved. I couldn't find that anywhere in the actual record of how many he saved. I think it was in the dozens, but so was that just Hollywood license to give us like this like superhero status?
I don't know. That is kind of strange considering that. I mean, this is supposed to be a true story and all that.
I wish that they had stuck as close to the truth as possible, because his actual actions were incredible.
Right. Yeah, we don't really need to necessarily inflate the totals or whatever, if that's what's happening. I mean, you looked into it more than I have, but I mean, I feel like just what he did alone is enough. We don't need to kind of exaggerate,
And do we know if he actually went down into that rabbit hole and had that close encounter with the Japanese?
Yeah, it didn't see. I mean, it said stuff like saving people from the mouth of a cave, but it didn't. I don't know if he. That seemed very Hollywood to me. Hiding while you're being chased and stuff. It seemed over the top to me, and it's like, why do we have to go there? Like, this guy was amazing. Why do we have to turn it into something that may not have been?
I feel like that's why shows like on HBO and like Netflix series are a little bit more popular now, because you have the ability to tell these stories without having to punch it down.
Right, kind of like a Band of Brothers.
Or The Pacific.
Yes, both very excellent World War II.
I mean, if you're intrigued by this movie, I urge you to watch The Pacific, which was, I think, 8 or 10 part miniseries.
I think they were both 10 parts.
On HBO. Yes, Band of
both
Brothers.
Spielberg and Tom Hanks.
Yeah, The Pacific obviously takes place in the Pacific, so it's like this. The Band of Brothers is in Europe. And then definitely the Clint Eastwood 2 movies, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Those 2 movies are incredible if you really want to see the realism of war. And to see it from the Japanese side, I felt this was a little bit too making the Japanese into bad guys.
Yeah.
Just superhuman, evil bad guys.
Yeah.
When you see it from the other side of what they were feeling, it's very powerful, because you have to examine some of your questions about, like, we made them faceless in this movie and just completely evil.
Yeah.
But there were faces.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's kind of like a tricky thing of a lot of stuff that portrays wars. It tends to be, if it's an American war, it's all about the American side of it, and you kind of don't maybe always give the thought you need to the fact that these are all just kids that are just getting roped into this thing that they really don't have much say in, It's their governments that are causing these wars to happen, and things that are so beyond any of these kids understanding. They're just thinking they're doing what's best for their country, but really it's just based on the decisions of a few people in power that are causing these things to happen. So every one of those people has a story, and they're just doing what they think is best, and they probably don't want to kill. I'd like to believe that most people don't want to kill anybody else. They're just doing it because they feel like it's what they have to do. And
if there were more Desmond Dosses, there may not be wars. If people could just stand up for what they believe in instead of getting steamrolled by a large military organization that says you have to do this.
Yeah.
All right, so I think it's time to jump to the reviews.
Yes.
I guess we'll start with Brent.
Okay, yeah, I'll start it off. I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 questionable Southern accents. Not bad, good in some parts, in other parts I was like, a little iffy. But yeah, I would say overall I like this as a war movie. I think the performances, for the most part, are really good, especially Hugo Weaving for me. I loved him. I'm happy to see him in a movie again. It feels like it's been a while. I liked that this was kind of a unique take on a war movie, just based on having a pacifist in World War II. I thought that was a very interesting lens to see this story through. But I don't know. There was aspects of it that didn't blow me away, like Vince Vaughn's performance. I think is okay, not great. Took me out of it a little bit. It's maybe a little slow. Like I said, I thought this movie was like over 2.5 hours, but it's actually less, which maybe speaks to some pacing issues.
Took me a couple weeks to watch it.
Yeah, it took me. I got it through in one day, but I did fall asleep twice, so I had to rewind a couple of times. But I was also very tired for other reasons. But anyway, I don't want to hold that against the movie because it was other. Yeah. So, but yeah, overall, I'd say a good movie. Definitely better than some other war movies I've seen, but not the best I've seen. So I would give it 3 out of 5 questionable Southern accents.
Awesome.
How about you, Bobby?
I'm going to give it a similar score. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 unexpected Vince Vaughns. Because I think that, yeah, it was a good movie. I really, I do want to kind of go back and watch it again. I don't want to just leave it behind, just like I do with some movies. I think that it, you can watch it and sort of relate to the pacifist mentality, which is nice. I think that you can sort of put yourself in Desmond's shoes, and I just think that it was overall a good movie. I wouldn't give it a perfect score because of certain flaws like casting and maybe, yeah, like you said, Brent, the length was a bit long for me. And maybe a bit too gory for my liking, but still a good movie. And so, yeah, 3 out of 5 unexpected Vince Vaughns.
Well, I loved it a lot more than you guys, apparently, because I'm going to give it a 4.5. I guess 4.5 neglected rifles. We can do that, because felt bad for that poor rifle that we left there. But I don't know. I like war movies, and this is definitely one of the top 5 for me that I've seen, which I've probably seen dozens of them. And I didn't have a problem with Vince Vaughn. I give him like a C+. It didn't ruin the movie for me. I didn't think it was too long. I thought it had good flow. I liked how it built up slowly because I was like rooting for him and getting the girl and learning about some medical knowledge, and then all of a sudden everybody's head's getting blown off and it's intestines on the ground, and it's like, wow, that's what it's like. You take a airplane ride and then you're in the thick of it, and it's just, I don't know, I thought it was really well done, and there was nothing cookie cutter about it. It was graphic, it was real, man, and that's why I liked it.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right, I'm going to give it 3.5 bowling knots.
Nice.
Sweet.
I kept, when we got to the battle scenes and stuff, I kept wishing for other movie. I kept reminiscing about the Pacific and Flags of Our Fathers, and so it actually just made me want to go see those movies again, because I think they were done better. I wanted, and basically because to me this was just one big battle scene, and I wanted more of a war. I wanted to see more of it, and so I didn't like the fact that it was condensed. But I did think the acting was fantastic. I thought that the battle scenes were well done, and I would recommend it if you're into war movies, because it definitely it told a story that needed to be told.
Definitely.
So 3.5 Bolins.
Nice. All right.
And we have another rating, the mysterious.
Oh yes, the mysterious
wife returns.
Yes.
Oh,
And the mysterious wife
does she like war movies?
is a nurse. And that's probably why she loved it so much.
yeah.
She gave it a 4.5 as well. She liked the intestines and all that stuff. She loves all that kind
She's
of
a
stuff.
big organ
not
fan.
grossed out by organs or anything being blown out of someone's body.
Fair enough.
And I don't think she's like a big, huge war movie person. But
Are we on to like a genre that
She-
nurses love? Like this had romance and it had intestines.
well,
so-
Yeah.
he falls in love with a nurse.
Yeah.
And all that, and I think she really liked Desmond.
Andrew Garfield's
And
character.
and that's, I think if you like him as an actor and you like him, the story.
This is definitely one of
Any-
his strongest performances that I've ever
Anything
seen.
based on a true story,
Yeah.
He made up for Spider-Man.
I always like that a little more, just because
Yeah.
feel like I'm learning a little bit.
All right, so that's the average of our scores. Not a bad average.
Yeah,
I
it's
would
pretty
say.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably worth your time.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, you know yourself, right? If you like war movies or you don't. There's a dividing line there. I mean, people like war movies or they don't. You can't really force someone to like a war movie.
I don't think I can make my wife watch this.
Right. Right. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got comments or suggestions, please leave them below. Thank you for watching this movie show. Now you know.